Liang, or rather Lord Elmeloy II, or rather Waver Velvet, mentally face-palmed himself at the situation in front of him, which was Ishtar and Astrea, or rather Rin and Livia, fighting over one small thing, which was who was the better student in Waver Velvet's class when they were alive. As Ishtar and Astrea were fighting, Shirou was on the sidelines, watching the fight go on while drinking his glass of juice. Meanwhile, Sima E, or rather Rhaenys Elmeloy Archizord, was watching the fight with a chuckle on her face while making some comments about the two goddesses fighting each other while Grey was looking at the fight fearfully. Teacher, are you alright? Grey asked. Waver Velvet let out a sigh. I'm fine, Grey. I'm just tired, he replied with a moan. I see. Do you want me to get something for you to drink, teacher? Yeah. Can you hand me a glass of juice later? I'm definitely going to need it soon. Why, yes. Grey then left Waver's side to get a glass of juice from one of the tables. As she did, Waver let out a sigh. This was a bad idea, he thought as his mind went back to what happened earlier. A few hours ago, Waver and Alexander were relaxing in one of Chaldea's recreational rooms, in which Alexander was reading a magazine while was laying down on one of the couches, getting a moment of rest after overworking himself again. As they were relaxing, it was then that Alexander said something that would spark a future event. Hey kid! How are those kids of yours doing? Alexander said. Kids? You mean my students? Waver replied. Yeah. Waver let out a sigh. Well, they've been fine actually, although they still remain the same now, even after separation, especially those two. Those two? Ishtar and Astrea, or rather Rin and Livia. I swear, they always start a fight whenever they meet each other. Really? Yeah, and it would always start from the smallest accident. For example, one day during one of my lectures, I had the whole class practice their magecraft, and do you want to know what happened next? What? Rin accidentally shot a gander at Livia right in the back of the head. Luckily, the damage wasn't serious, but that's where things got messy. How so? Waver sighed again. Livia didn't take the accidental shot well and shot a gander right back at Rin, in which she also did not take it well and started a huge fight, which ended up nearly destroying the classroom. Alexander was slightly amused upon hearing the fight between Ishtar and Astrea. Is that so? Yeah. Even now, I still remember the fight, and the amount of damage those two made in the fight. There were giant holes everywhere on the walls. The windows were broken, the tables were nearly destroyed, and some of the staff and students nearby were injured in the process. And don't even get me started on the cost of the damages. I swear, those two will be the death of me one day. Alexander laughed at the misfortune his former master went through as a teacher. Wow. Guess those two seriously made you mad, huh? Yeah. If it wasn't for Shirou stopping them back then the damages would even be more disastrous, and I would have to go through a giant scolding at the clock tower about how I was responsible for the damages. Waver said with a groan. After the damage was cleaned up, I gave those two a giant scolding that they shouldn't forget. Alexander let out a chuckle. Sounds like you did a good job being a teacher. Yeah, although I'm a half-baked teacher at best. Waver replied. Alexander then went back to the magazine he was reading earlier. Speaking of which, you mentioned that Emiya Shirou stopped that fight. How did he stop that fight? Waver let out a small sigh. Well, all he did to stop that fight was just to get between the two and tell time to stop fighting, which is baffling, because apparently those two only listened to him for some reason, and I don't even know how. I mean, come on, nearly every other student wouldn't dare to go into a fight between those two, and yet, Emiya Shirou, being the reckless idiot that he is, not only comes in between the two and comes out unscathed, but he also calmed them down. I swear, even now, It puzzles me how he managed to calm them down without doing anything. Waver ranted. Alexander laughed at Waver's childish rant. Ha 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 ha. Emiya Shirou is quite the man, isn't he? A man with so many talents. Cooking, cleaning, fixing broken items, fighting. It's a shame that he didn't join my army. Especially since he has the power to seize control of the world. Hey, Emiya Shirou isn't the type of person who would join an army, you know, especially under an army which wants to conquer the entire world. He has his own dreams and convictions to follow, and he's sure as hell to stay with them until the bitter end, Waver argued. You do have a point there, Alexander said as he turned a page of the magazine he was reading. By the way, who's the person that always follows you and looks like the King of Knights? Oh, her. That's Gray, my assistant and one of my students. Assistant? You mean like a strategist or a general? And a little girl like her? Waver mentally groaned. It's nothing like that. Think of it as well, a helper you might say. And plus, don't underestimate her. Believe it or not, she actually possesses Rongaminiad. Wow. I didn't know that. Me neither. Well, up until a few months later, that is. Then a moment of silence occurred as Waver continued to relax on the couch while Alexander continued reading his magazine. As he did, a few thoughts came into his head. Wow. So, my former master has 4 students here in the form 2 goddesses, a person that looks like the King of Knights, and a man who not only owns 2 noble phantasms in which one of them is a reality marble while the other is a sword that cuts through destiny, karma, and fate itself, but can also defeat the King of Heroes and his noble phantasm with them. Seems like he picked up quite the students to teach. Wait a minute, this gives me an idea. Alexander then stopped reading the magazine and put it on a nearby table. Hey, my former master, I have a question to ask for you. Waver sighed. What is it? When was the last time you ever met with your students? Waver then gave Alexander's question a long thought. I suppose a while ago. Why? Alexander grinned. Well, why not have a class reunion with them now all together? Waver nearly did a spit take at Alexander's question. What? Huh? You didn't hear me clearly the first time, kid? Then I'll explain it again. Why not have a class reunion with them now all together? For a moment, Waver was silent upon hearing Alexander's question. After a few minutes of thinking about it, Waver had his answer. No. Alexander was not amused. Why not? Isn't it fun to meet with your old students again? Waver sighed. First, I already did that with Shirou and Ishtar. And second, why should I, stuck at the 4th tier I still be, have to bloody look after other people at a class reunion? Especially since said people happen to be my students? Come on. Don't be so uptight, you know. Learn to relax a bit, have some fun once in a while, connect with your students. For the last time, no, Waver said as he turned around to the other side of the couch, not wanting to see Alexander's face. Alexander sighed as he now knew what to do to get him to agree. Well, guess that means I have to do this then. Alexander then got out of his seat and began to lift Waver up. What the hey? What are you doing? Waver yelled. Well, if you're not going to create a class reunion party for your students, then I will. Alexander replied as he began to carry Waver out of the recreational room. Put me down. Never. Now then, let us go secure some tables, food, drinks, plates, and the guests that we need. Alexander roared pridefully. And Alexander then began to drag Waver throughout all of Chaldea, finding the perfect food, drinks, and decorations for the class reunion party. Back to the present. I can't believe my former servant just dragged me throughout all of Chaldea, gathering all of the materials needed for a class reunion party, and somehow rented a private room for all of that to happen. Furthermore, he even managed to not only invite my former students, but also Rhaenys as well. I'm even more surprised that she tagged along as well. Waver thought. Teacher? Gray said, snapping Waver out of his thoughts. HM? Oh, what is it, Gray? Here's the glass of juice you asked for. Oh yeah. Thanks. Waver then took the glass of juice from Gray's hands and began to drink it, hoping that it will calm his nerves down. Hey Gray, talk to Shirou for now. I need to be alone for a moment. Why yes. Gray then went over to where Shirou was. Meanwhile, Shirou looked at the fight between Ishtar and Astria with a sweat drop on his face. Wow, they're at it again. Why is it that whenever both of them meet each other, it always ends up turning into a fight, he thought as he sipped on his glass of juice. So Emiya Shirou, what do you think of the party my teacher's former servant came up with? Gray asked. HM? Oh yeah, the party's great actually, Shirou replied. I see. I'm glad that you liked it. Gray said. Yeah. Although I'm surprised that Waver Sensei's former servant came up with this. Me too. I didn't know he was capable of doing something like this. Yeah. By the way, how's life in Chaldea doing for you? Oh. Well, Chaldea is, well, crazy for the most part. The technology and magecraft is high-tech here, there are a lot of servants here, and the number of hallways here is driving me crazy. I see, by any chance, did you meet Arturia and her counterparts? Why yeah. At first, I was scared of her because of my past from that village and didn't meet her for the first few months. However, with some encouragement from teacher, I was able to have a conversation with her. Is that so? How did it turn out? Gray let out a smile. It was great. The conversation itself put all of my fears to rest. You wouldn't believe my emotions when the King of Knights was mad at what the villagers put me through. Well then, I'm glad that things went well between you two, Shirou said with a smile on his face. Gray quickly turned around. Why yeah. And me too. It was then that Shirou felt someone poking his cheek. Oh my, you seem to be quite the smooth talker, aren't you, Emiya Shirou? Rhaenys asked as she poked his cheek. Shirou let out a sigh as he now knew who was poking his cheek. Rhaenys, you still haven't changed, huh? Rhaenys smirked. And you still haven't changed too. You're still the same reckless idiot with a ridiculous dream. She said as she continued poking his cheek. Shirou sighed again. Will you stop poking me, Rhaenys? Nope. In fact, I'm going to inflict more pain on you. Rhaenys then grabbed his cheek and started to tug on it. Like this. Ow, that hurts. Shirou moaned. Upon hearing those words from Shirou, Ishtar and Astria stopped their fighting and shot some of their jewels at Rhaenys, in which she dodged them. Oh my. Rhaenys said. Rhaenys, let go of Shirou this instant and stop picking on him. Astria yelled. Yeah. And quit picking on him. Ishtar yelled. Eh? Why not? He seems so fun to pick on, don't you think, Rin? Rhaenys replied. Gay. Ishtar yelled as she remembered the many times she teased him during the 5th Fuyuki Grail War. Anyways, let go of Emiya Kuan now this instant. Rhaenys let out a pout now that her fun was over. Fine. She then let go of Shirou's cheek. Shirou let out a sigh as Rhaenys's was done pinching his cheek. It was then that Waver began to speak. Ahem. I know we were all gathered here by my former servant in which he told me to be a lot more social than I should be, so, how about we just talk for a moment? Everyone nodded at Waver's question. Great. Now, who wants to start? For a moment, everyone was silent as they were trying to figure out how to start the conversation. Eventually, Raina started the conversation. Okay, there's a question I want to ask. Emiya Shirou, where the hell were you after you graduated from the clock tower? You literally disappeared off the entire earth after you left the clock tower. I swear everyone here thought you were dead during that time up until now. Rhaenys asked. Yeah. We want to know too. Ishtar, Astria, and Grey asked in unison. Waver let out a sigh. This is not going to end well for him, especially if he starts talking about that. Shirou took a deep breath before answering Rhaenys' question. After graduating from the clock tower, I went on a journey throughout the entire world. During that time, I've experienced many things. One of which was my discovery of my long-lost heritage and my ancestor, Sango Muramasa. Everyone silently listened to Shirou's explanation. During the meeting with Sango Muramasa, he gave me the knowledge of the Muramasa blades he created in his lifetime along with his noble phantasm, Sumigari Muramasa. In exchange for that, he resided in my reality marble. Sumigari Muramasa, isn't that the well-known god-killer blade that beat the king of heroes? Grey asked. Shirou let out a sigh. Yeah. Anyways, after obtaining the Sumigari Muramasa, well, let's just say, I ended in many situations that were deemed impossible. At that moment, everyone in the room stared at Shirou. What kind of situations are we talking about, Emiya-kun? Ishtar asked in a scary tone. Shirou was silent. Emiya-kun? Shirou let out a sigh. Situations that would make the events of the 4th and 5th Fuyuki Grail Wars pale in comparison, and I don't want to talk about it. Everyone was shocked upon hearing Shirou's words. Wait, what? Shirou was startled a bit before continuing. Why yeah. What kind of situations are we talking about? Rhaenys asked. What did you get yourself into, Shirou? Astria asked. Spit it out, Emiya-kun. Ishtar yelled. Alright, what did you do? Waver asked. As Shirou was being hounded by Ishtar, Astria, Waver, and Rhaenys, Grey decided to step in. Stop it. Don't all of you understand that what you're doing is making him uncomfortable? Give Shirou some space here. He's not going to answer any of your questions if you keep hounding him like this. Grey yelled. Everyone was surprised by Grey's outburst, especially Waver. Since when was Grey this loud, they all thought. Upon realizing what she just did, Grey apologized to Ishtar, Astria, Waver, and Rhaenys. Ah, sorry. I just yelled out loud, and dash. It's okay, we forgive you, Ishtar said. Yeah. You were right actually. We can't keep bothering Shirou on a topic he doesn't want to talk about, Astria said. Exactly. If he's not going to say anything now, then we'll just wait later, Rhaenys said. Yeah. As much as I hate it, we'll let Shirou keep this information to himself, Waver said. Grey let out a sigh of relief. Thank you everyone. Shirou also let out a sigh of relief. Thank you for saving me, Grey, he said with a smile on his face. Grey quickly blushed. It's nothing. Anyways, let's continue the conversation, shall we? Yeah. Speaking of which, remember those times when you two would constantly fight over the smallest things? Rhaenys asked Ishtar and Astria with a smug look on her face. Ishtar and Astria then turned their heads towards the opposite direction, not wanting to look at each other. Poof, they said in unison. Waver let out a sigh. Yeah. For example, that one time where you two literally wiped out an entire floor during your fight, he moaned as he remembered the event clearly. The number of damages you two made, it gave me quite the migraine. I remember that, teacher. And for the entire day, you locked yourself in your room for quite a while after giving the two a giant lecture, Gray said. Yeah. Just one question though, what were you two fight about? Shirou asked. Both Ishtar and Astrea were silent after hearing Shirou's question. Seeing the silence, Rhaenys decided to use this opportunity to embarrass Ishtar and Astrea and came up to Shirou. Well, let me tell you. They were fighting over their room arrangements. Shirou was confused at Rhaenys's answer. Room arrangements? Rhaenys let out a smirk. Yeah. You had an empty room next to your room back the dorm, correct? Yeah. Well, it just so happens that Ishtar and Astrea over there wanted that room, so they were fighting over who gets to be the owner of that room. Ishtar and Astrea blushed after hearing the reason why that fight occurred. Damn it, Rhaenys, they thought in unison. However, Waver nearly exploded. What? So, let me get this straight. The reason why you two were fighting, which resulted in an entire floor was destroyed and a lot of damage, was to decide who would be next to Shirou's room, he yelled. Ishtar and Astrea were still silent. Well? Why yes. They said in unison. Waver groaned. By the root, you two will be the death of me. Rhaenys let out a giggle. Well then, that was fun to hear. For a moment, there was silence in the group as Waver was recovering from the revelation he just experienced earlier. Then Gray decided to speak up. You know, this class reunion is quite fun. The food, drinks, everyone chatting. I mean, when was the last time everyone from teacher's class were brought together? Gray asked. Everyone then gave Gray's question some thought and realized something. They haven't done something like since they all graduated from the clock tower. You're right, Gray. It's been a long time since we've done something like this, Ishtar said. Yeah. Ever since all of us graduated from the clock tower and headed on our own paths. Astrea said. Yeah. Gray stayed as Big Brother's assistant, me and you two became big shots in the clock tower, and Shirou, well, mysteriously disappeared, Rhaenys said. Yeah. And I guess we have one person to thank for this reunion. Waver said. Yeah. Master. Shirou said. For a moment, everyone was silent as they were thanking Ritsuka for making this happen. After a moment of silence, Shirou then decided to speak up. Now then, shall we continue this reunion? He asked. Ishtar, Astrea, Gray, Rhaenys, and surprisingly Waver nodded in agreement. Alright then. Let us continue then. And then the class reunion party continued. Everyone continued eating, drinking, and chatting among each other. As they did, Waver looked at the scene with a smile on his face. This isn't so bad. Maybe he was right.